Welcome to MLB Tonight, presented by Camping World for Monday, April 13th. Matt Vasgersian, and thanks to NTT Home Plate Cam, joined by Harold Reynolds and Dan Plesac. Gentlemen, good evening. Harold, Easter weekend has come and gone. We were supposed to have a rematch of last year's ALDS between the Rays and the Astros. We were supposed to have A's Red Sox to talk about, but I'm talking to you in your living room once again today. Good evening.
Good evening. You know what, though? I did have a great Easter. It was fun being around the whole family and not traveling and being home, and had a good dinner. Gotta admit, grub was good, but no baseball yet, Dan. And it is still kind of strange not seeing baseball.
No, you know what? I was actually down by the shore near Lavallette, New Jersey, and I had a great Easter afternoon. And it seems weird not having baseball on Easter. I think back to 1987. I think we're going to touch on it later in the show. One of the great Easter Sunday games that I was a part of in 1987 in Milwaukee, an Easter Sunday I'll never forget.
Oh, simpler times. We don't want to, chomp the bit on that one, but it was 80 degrees in Milwaukee on Easter Sunday, 1987. We'll whet your appetite for what's to come with that. Hey, guys, as we know, the league has undertaken a couple of initiatives during this terrible stretch with COVID-19 wrapping up the country to try to keep everybody's mind off baseball and to try to generate some awareness for those in need. One such initiative is a national campaign to Light It Blue. Light It Blue last week. MLB took part with ballparks all around the league lit up in bright blue on Thursday in order to show appreciation for the frontline workers and first responders who continue to battle COVID-19 every day. MLB doing its part in the Light It Blue campaign. In addition, this one's a little bit more on the fun side. Friday, MLB announced the Players League, the first of its kind tournament pits one player from each big league team in a weekend-long MLB The Show tournament. MLB The Show 20 is available now. It's going to raise nearly $200,000 for Boys and Girls Clubs of America and Canada. Some fun as we kind of wrap up the weekend and get into a new week. And if you were watching the news and trying to take part in something other than the bad news out there these days, maybe you heard this light at the end of the tunnel report by Bob Nightingale, the USA Today, unveiling one of a number of plans that Major League Baseball is looking into to try to resume play and begin the 2020 season. It's realignment based on spring training geography, and this is fascinating. Per Bob Nightingale's report, and again, it's one of many plans the league is looking into, this is the way the league would look. We'll start with the reimagined or realigned Grapefruit League for 2020. The North, very compelling with the Phillies and Yankees sharing a division. In the South, you've got 4 potential postseason teams and the World Series teams from last year in the East, along with a very good Mets and Cardinals team. Before we get your comments, guys, let's go to the Cactus League realignment plan. Cubs and A's in the same division. In the West, everybody would try to chase the Dodgers, so the White Sox, Reds, Indians, and Angels will know what it's like to be the Arizona Diamondbacks if this happens. And in the Northwest, looks like the Brewers would be the team to beat there because the Padres, boy, as intriguing as they are, no one really knows what they're going to look like in 2020. So give me your thoughts on these realigned divisions, Dan.
You know, Matt, when I first looked at it, 2 things jumped out at me. The Grapefruit League, the Grapefruit South. You have the Red Sox, the Twins, the Braves, and the Rays, as you touched on. 4 playoff caliber teams all in the same division. And then you look at the East, and I don't know if it could get any tougher than this. You have the reigning world champion Nationals. You have the Astros, the Mets, who are looking to have a powerhouse 2020, and the St. Louis Cardinals should be healthy this year. I think those 2 divisions, the Grapefruit South and East, remind me of 2 brutally tough divisions. I think the concept is unique. It's different, but 2020 is a different kind of year, Matt, and there's something cool about it that I think would pique a lot of interest in a lot of fans.
Well, for me, Dan, the first thing that jumped out to me, I'm looking at the Cincinnati Reds. They go out and they spend all this money. They start to put their club in a position. And the next thing you know, they're thrown in a division for them that seems impossible. You're with the Dodgers once again. You're thrown in there. They're going to battle their state rival, the Indians, and the Angels are going to be loaded up too, and the White Sox are better. So I think that's better than the division would have been normally for them had they stayed in the National League Central. And then I look at the Mariners and I say, all right, boys, let's buckle up, man. We got a chance. We got the Astros out of there. Angels are out of there, the big money teams. We got a chance to win this thing. So do you reload in this little short period of time to be able to make that run? But I do end it with this, Matt, and throw it back to you. They have to try something. I'm intrigued with this. If there's any time to shake things up, now's the time. I mean, you got to look at the travel, the effect the virus is going to have across the globe, and to stay regional and try to do something different. I'm all in. They got to try something, no doubt about it.
Well, I think we'd all agree that certainly the landscape needs to be friendly to play resuming, first of all. Everything needs to be cleared. So we'll work with that assumption. I think it's also fair to assume that whatever plan takes place, whether it's this geographical spring training realignment or something else, I think it'd be great if the postseason is expanded. And those plans were in discussion to begin with, even without the landscape being the way it is. Some combination of more teams in the postseason and geographical realignment, Harold, makes a lot of sense just from where I sit.
Well, that and the other part of it they're discussing is a destination World Series. I've always thought, why are we not doing that anyway? Why are we trying to play baseball games in November in crazy cold weather? Pick a destination. I would love to be able to, the next 3 years, sit there and go, I'm going to go to Miami for the World Series, and I'm going to go to games 3 and 4 if I'm a fan, and go ahead and pick that out. I don't care who's playing, and you've already picked your destination. So I think for the game to market, all the things you can do, I'm all about a destination World Series. Dan, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts initially were this. If I were in the Cactus League, Matt, you and I have spent, and Harold, a lot of time in spring training in Arizona, and it gets awfully hot in the desert in June, July, and August, whether they would play night games or early morning games. I just think the climate in Arizona would be really tough to deal with for these teams. And if you equate 1 day a week having to have a doubleheader so they would be able to get a certain amount of games in, I would think if you're in Arizona, you're going to have to get ready for the heat because it is awfully hot that time of the year in the desert.
Yeah. Morning games have been proposed if Arizona is in fact a solution. Again, it's one of many potential solutions that Major League Baseball is looking into. More on that certainly in the days and weeks to come. We do have sad news to report from over the weekend as well, as COVID-19 has claimed a member of the baseball family. Anthony Causey was a longtime sports photographer with the New York Post, and he lost his life to the dreaded disease on Sunday. We're showing you some of the great shots taken by Causey over his 25-plus year career. He was known as much for his larger-than-life personality as he was for the baseball images he captured on and off the field. He is survived by his wife and 2 children. Many in the baseball community mourning his loss, including Philly Didi Gregorius, who said via Twitter, "My condolences go to the Causey family. Anthony was a great, funny, and awesome guy to talk to and learn from about sports photography. May he rest in peace." Very sad news. We at MLB Network mourn the loss of Anthony Causey, who is gone at the age of 48. More MLB Tonight when we continue.
MLB Tonight is presented by Camping World, making RVing fun and easy since 1966. Visit campingworld.com today.
So in the absence of a gym, I ask you, Dan Plesac, who is getting the better workout here, Sean Doolittle or the dog?
I'll tell you what, if I'm the 4-legged guy right now, I'm like, come on, Sean, we've got some weights inside the house. You got to pick me up after I eat? Oh, man. Oh, man.
Hey, some people are really working out hard. You remember Jared Hughes? He was a bigger dude at one point in his career. He's a free agent. He used to sprint in from the bullpen. Wait till you see what he looks like now. He's been doing a lot of sprinting, apparently.
Holy smokes, he's down some weight. Looks good, huh?
Good. And on Easter Sunday, the day before his birthday, by the way, happy birthday, Lorenzo Cain, surprised the kids.
I told you the Easter Bunny was a brother, Matt. I told you. proof right there.
Happy birthday to Lorenzo. On this day, speaking of this day, April 13th, some notable baseball anniversaries. Reggie Jackson was in the midst of one of the most prolific home run binges of his career. First pitch he saw on opening day, the home opener at Yankee Stadium. What did he do? He did what he did 3 times in the previous year's Fall Classic to beat the Dodgers. First swing at home, homer. That's 4 straight swings at the stadium, 4 straight homers over a year-plus period. And they showered the field with Reggie bars, which were new on the market at that time. Harold, what do you got?
That was so cool. You know, I debated between Pete Rose got his first hit and his 4,000th hit on the same day, 21 years apart. But I was part of this one that I'm picking. Is Phil Bradley hitting a walk-off grand slam. He had not homered in 83 and 84 in those 2 seasons. And that spring, Darren Johnson, our hitting coach, changed his whole swing. He had 26 home runs that year in the All-Star game, changed his whole career. And he hit that granny to walk it off. It was pretty cool to see the old Missouri quarterback, Mr. Phil Bradley. We used to call him Smoothie because he ran so smooth all the time.
Harold, the best game I was ever involved in the month of April, Easter Sunday, 1987. I'm going to make a bold statement. I think the greatest game in April in Milwaukee Brewers history. We were 11-0 on Easter Sunday. Huge walk-up crowd. Rob Deere, 3-run bomb to tie it. Dale Swaim, 2-run homer to win it in the bottom of the 9th inning to push us to 12-0. And I can still, to this day, I was warming up in case that game stayed tied. I was going to pitch the top of the 10th inning. And all I remember, I threw a pitch to Charlie O'Brien. And as he was throwing it back to me, I looked out on the field and I saw Dale Swaim taking 2 steps and throwing his arms up into the air. And I'm telling you, Harold, it was like a 12-year-old all-star game after that game in a clubhouse. Grown men acting like they were 12 years old.
Didn't you guys start 13-0 that year?
13-0. We went the next night.
Wow.
We had a Monday night game in Old Comiskey Park against the White Sox. We won that game 5-4 to go to 13-0. And we didn't make the playoffs that year. We were under 500 at the All-Star break.
And 5 years before the Easter Sunday miracle, as it's still referred to in Milwaukee, the Brewers took the St. Louis Cardinals to the brink before the Redbirds lifted the Commissioner's Trophy as 1982 World Series champs. When we come back, we will preview a show on MLB Network that shines the spotlight on Whitey Herzog's great Cardinals teams of the 1980s. Next on MLB Tonight.
Home Plate Cam is presented by NTT.
Welcome back to MLB Tonight, presented by Camping World. Hey, tonight at 7 Eastern, a special MLB Network presents spotlighting the 1980s Cardinals. This documentary, narrated by Missouri native John Goodman, provides a glimpse at a Cardinals team built on small ball, base running, and defense. Here's a sneak peek.
You could probably come up with a lot of reasons why St. Louis is known as such a great baseball town. But at the center, without a doubt, are all the great teams and all the great players who've come through the city. All of them, in a way, timeless. All of them very much products of their own eras, too. But in the 80s, there was a group of players led by a manager who even now all stand out for being a little different than all the others. They were fun to watch, a blast to root for, and totally, completely original.
Oh man, is that scintillating baseball!
So what do you say we go back to another time when the St. Louis Cardinals made baseball look a little different and drove the rest of the game crazy trying to keep up with them? Because another look all these years later proves they were just as much of a thrill as you might remember.
One of the winningest teams of the decade, 3 pennants, a World Series title in 1982 that we referenced a moment ago. Harold, what's your first thing that pops into your head when you think of Whitey's Rats, the 80s Cardinals?
So different than from today's game. The first thing, though, Matt, is 7 switch hitters. I mean, you had Coleman, Ozzie Smith, Pendleton, I go on, Tommy Herr. It was just impressive, Willie McGee, what they were able to do with the speed, the defensive combination of the switch hitters. And you just wouldn't see that today. And the last thing I think about is the AstroTurf, how much of a game changer that was. And this was really a club that was built according to the field they played on. They just put pressure on you, Dan. Everywhere you look, everybody wanted to be a Cardinal team, and they really changed how baseball was played in the 80s.
Harold, you get it. I think one word, when I try to think of the Cardinals in the 80s, was havoc. They were really the first team in baseball that up and down the lineup, with the exception maybe of Keith Hernandez and Darryl Porter behind the plate, most of the guys in that lineup could steal a base. They were kind of the baseball equivalent to one of those really good athletic basketball teams that could full court press you and get you into an up-tempo game. And nobody did it better in the 80s than the St. Louis Cardinals.
Harold, do you remember we had Terry Pendleton on the program on Hot Stove over the offseason? We were talking to him about playing on that AstroTurf, and he was telling us stories about how they cooled off. They'd put frozen cabbage leaves between their cap and their helmet. I mean, all the different things, putting your feet in buckets of water or buckets of whatever to keep yourself cool. You guys played on turf back then in the 80s. It didn't sound like a lot of fun.
No, it was hot, no doubt about it. When you went to a place like Kansas City, I wasn't in the National League, but in Kansas City, I remember times there was 120 degrees on the turf. And yes, you would soak your feet in ice when you would come off the field. But I always thought that AstroTurf was such an advantage, being able to slap a ball and you're going to get a base hit. Or if you had guys that had power, they could hit a ball in the gap and hit home runs. It just changed the dynamic. When baseball took the AstroTurf out, I think it changed how the game was played and has really led to what we see today, more base-to-base, power-to-power. But Dan, you played in Milwaukee in that Midwest, and I'm sure you came against some clubs when you were with Cardinals, when you played with the Cubs playing on those turfs.
You know, the first time, Harold, my first 7 years I was with Milwaukee. Milwaukee was then in the American League. So 1993 was my first venture into Busch Stadium, the old Busch Stadium. And I will say this, the bullpens were down the left and the right field foul lines. My feet have never been so hot ever in my life. And Matt, I can tell you this, it was a Saturday afternoon day game. In the bottom of your feet wearing those metal cleats, I could see why guys put cabbage, lettuce, whatever. That was my first experience. My feet were on fire for 3 hours.
Story of the 80s Cardinals coming up tonight on MLB Network. Let's check out Winning Together, presented by Doosan. And it's one of the iconic Cardinals moments from those vintage teams in the 1980s.
$55,208 sitting in on Game 6. And it's lined to left field. So the time run is aboard. And here comes Ozzie. Away, ball 4. It is Jack Clark and Tom Niedenfuhr going head-to-head. And the ball game on the line, and the crowd on its feet.
Swinging a long one into left field. Adios, goodbye, and maybe that's the winner. A 3-run homer by Clark, and the Cardinals lead by the score of 7-5, and they may go to the World Series on that one, folks.
Winning Together is presented by Doosan. Doosan and MLB remind you to stay at home and stop the spread.
Welcome back to MLB Tonight, presented by Camping World. And before we say goodbye today, baseball says goodbye to Mark Reynolds, and this via the Rockies Twitter feed. Congratulations to Mark Reynolds on an outstanding 13-year career. The homers, the picks, the leadership, and the clutch hits will always remember Mark Reynolds announcing his retirement after a 13-year career. 3 of those years spent with the Rockies. We wish him well.
I've always mentioned Mark Reynolds is my cousin from Virginia. I'm going to miss seeing him play. When he came up as a third baseman with Arizona, great hands, he could handle it, but he always had the power, Dan. And that's what I will always remember with Mark Reynolds is the power.
You know, our compadre Eric Burns once told me that he thought pound for pound that Mark Reynolds had as much pop or more pop than anybody in baseball. He told me, don't let that physique scare you. This guy had some wiry, nasty pop.
Weird to suggest for a guy that just retired that he might have been a little before his time, right? Mark Reynolds was onto something. It doesn't matter if you punch out every once in a while. You can hit the long ball. You're going to play in big leagues for a long time, as Mark Reynolds did. That's it for us. A special 1-hour Jackie Robinson edition of MLB Tonight coming up on Wednesday.